Making headlines tonight. The WHO Regional Director of the Western Pacific, Dr. Takashi Hasai, has congratulated Prime Minister Hun Sen on his leadership for the fight against COVID-19, which have saved millions of lives. He said that considers Cambodia's role in the fight against COVID-19 as a model for the world. Cambodia-Japan relations this year have been further strengthening, as evidenced by the visit of the Prime Minister of Japan to Cambodia. Ukraine on Wednesday carried out the biggest exchange of prisoners of war since Russia invaded, securing the release of 144 of its soldiers, including 95 who defended Mariupol steelworkers. R. Kelly was sentenced to 30 years in prison following the multi-platinum R&B singer's conviction for exploiting his stardom and wealth over decades of lure women and underage girls in orbit for sex. This is the Daily Roundup here on EAC News Channel. A very good evening to you. I'm Anthony Ellis. The WHO Regional Director of the Western Pacific, Dr. Takashi Hasai, has congratulated Prime Minister Hun Sen on his leadership for the fight against COVID-19, which has saved millions of lives. He has said it considers Cambodia's role in the fight of COVID-19 as the role model for the world. EAC News reporter Darshana Guchin has the story.
In a meeting with Prime Minister Hun Sen at the Peace Palace on Thursday morning, Dr. Takashi Hasai noted three special features of Cambodia during the global COVID-19 outbreak: widespread vaccination, monitoring and response, and the acceptance of the Westerdam ship, which showed that the Cambodian government cares deeply about people's lives. The Prime Minister's assistant, Ieng Sopalet, told reporters after the meeting, "At that time, there were 27 ships out at sea that had nowhere to dock, while Cambodia allowed ships to dock, so other countries also allowed ships to do the same." Dr. Takashi Hasai emphasized that Cambodia was a country that saved the lives of many people who were stranded at the time. Prime Minister Hun Sen thanked the WHO for its vision and guidance on Cambodia's measures. He told Dr. Hasai that Cambodia's success in controlling the COVID-19 outbreak was due to the right vaccination strategy, which he described as a blossoming strategy. He also said that the decision to bring the Westerdam into Cambodia was born out of a purely humanitarian spirit, as Cambodia could not stand to watch the people on board of the ship die of starvation. Cambodia has currently vaccinated more than 94% of its 16 million population. Cambodia is considered by the WHO to be a small country with a big heart, after allowing the MS Westerdam carrying more than 2,000 people to dock after several countries had refused over concerns that passengers may have been carrying COVID-19 infections. According to a WHO report, Cambodia's response to the MS Westerdam crisis demonstrates that a country with fewer resources can contribute to global health security. It can take a humanitarian approach in a public health crisis and deliver a measured, coordinated response despite the uncertainty and complex challenges. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
Cambodian Japanese relations this year has been further strengthening as evidence of the visit of the Prime Minister of Japan to Cambodia. The visit of the Prime Minister Hun Sen and the commander of the Royal Cambodian Army to Japan, the docking of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force ship in Seattleville, the exchange of humanitarian aid, and the friendship shows by previous Japanese ambassadors to Cambodia. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has more.
On Thursday morning, the former Japanese ambassador to Cambodia, Kotaro Ogawa, arrived in Cambodia to meet directly with Prime Minister Hun Sen. During the meeting, Kotaro Ogawa expressed his pleasure to return to the Kingdom of Cambodia again. He said that Cambodia is now very prosperous and developed compared to when he was the ambassador of Japan in 2003. He said that these positive changes had come about due to the right policies of the Cambodian government. The Prime Minister's assistant Ieng Sopalet told reporters that after the meeting, even though His Excellency ended his diplomatic mission and left Cambodia, his heart will always be with Cambodia. He added that Mr. Ogawa is now contributing to Cambodia in the field of education through language training, research and culture, aiding the law sector and also the field of judo martial arts, which will particularly help Cambodia in regard to the 2023 SEA Games. Kotaro Ogawa was the former ambassador of Japan to the Kingdom of Cambodia from 2000 to 2003. Prime Minister Hun Sen expressed his gratitude to Mr. Ogawa for his contribution to expanding Cambodia-Japan relations and the development of Cambodia, which he now still continues to assist, especially in the field of human resource training. The Prime Minister also asked Mr. Ogawa to assist Cambodia in the field of judo martial arts in order to ensure that Cambodia has a sufficient capacity to compete in judo at the upcoming SEA Games in 2023. It should also be reminded that 2022 is the 30th anniversary of Japanese peacekeeping operations on the international stage, and Cambodia was the first country that Japan came out to help maintain peace in 1992 during the UNTAC era. 2023 will also mark the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Japan and Cambodia. Earlier this year, Cambodian Japanese relations saw closer ties after Japan invited Honman Knight to visit the country, and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio visited Cambodia and docked a Japanese self-defense force ship in Cambodia in March. Recently, Prime Minister Hun Sen also attended a meeting on water issues in the Asia-Pacific region in Japan and met directly with Prime Minister of Japan. Bekanin, EAC News.
The Minister of Interior, Deputy Prime Minister Saw Keng, has said that Cambodia will do its best to remove itself from the grey list of the countries at risk of money laundering, as well as to promote Cambodia's reputation both regionally and internationally. EAC News reporter Darshana Guchin has further details.
Speaking at a meeting on Wednesday, 29th June on disseminating the results of work and setting the work direction related to the fight against money laundering, financing of terrorism, and financing of genocide, the chairman of the National Coordinating Committee of the Royal Cambodian Armed Forces, Deputy Prime Minister Saw Keng, recommended revising the composition and expanding the scope of the Cambodian People's Party, as well as establishing subcommittees and working groups to lead and implement the remaining work under this agenda. He particularly urged for Cambodia to make efforts to be removed from the grey list of countries at risk of money laundering as soon as possible. The governor of the National Bank of Cambodia, Chia Chan-to, reported that after being included in the grey list for a second time in early 2009, Cambodia has strived to implement a 14-point action plan launched and completed for the preparation of the 9th Progress Report, set by April 2022, to achieve the immediate removal of Cambodia from the list of concern. He added that Cambodia continues to report and maintain the growth of data related to the submission of reports and the number of investigations and allegations of money laundering, which requires the involvement of relevant officials to pull Cambodia out of the grey list and guarantee the stability of Cambodia's banking and financial system when international teams come to visit again in January 2023. The Minister of Justice and Chairman of the Subcommittee on the Implementation of the Action Plan of the Joint Monitoring Group of the Asia-Pacific Group on International Cooperation, CADRAT, reported that Cambodia has now established anti-money laundering mechanisms in ministries and institutions, which is the key to ensuring the effectiveness and sustainability of anti-money laundering efforts in Cambodia, both for the short and long term. Deputy Prime Minister Saw Keng reiterated to the authorities the importance of taking measures to find the root sources of the drug traffickers' finances and to freeze or confiscate them so that criminals cannot launder their money. He asked, "Are there any resources, assets, including budget, land, houses, other means or equipment that are relevant, and where do the perpetrators get them from, and how much do they have? If we find this out, then the court will make a decision to freeze or confiscate the resources, which is what we have to do." Cambodia continues to be included on the Financial Action Task Force's grey list, denoting countries at risk of money laundering and that need to be closely monitored. This is the third year that the institution has put Cambodia on the list of concern. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear.
Ukraine on Wednesday carried out its biggest exchange of prisoners of war since Russia invaded, securing the release of 144 of its soldiers, including 95 who defended Mariupol steelworkers, Ukraine's military intelligence agency said.
The majority of the Ukrainians were badly wounded, suffering from gunshot and shrapnel wounds, blast traumas, burned, fractured bones, and amputated limbs, agency known by the acronym GUR said in a statement on Telegram. There was no comment from Russia about a prisoner swap, but the head of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine said it had secured the release of 144 soldiers, including its fighters and those of the Russian army. We handed over to Kyiv the same number of prisoners from Ukrainian army units, most of whom were wounded. Hundreds more Ukrainians are still thought to be held by Russia and its pro-Moscow separatist proxies in eastern Ukraine, but their precise whereabouts are not known. In particular, Kyiv has worried over the fate of hundreds of fighters from the Azov regiment that played a prominent role in the defense of Mariupol and its Azovstal steelworks before being encircled and eventually laying down their arms. The prisoner swap included the handover of 43 members of the Azov regiment, a National Guard unit that Russia says is dangerous far-right battalion, a promising sign for Ukrainians hoping for the release of other fighters from the unit.
R. Kelly was sentenced on Wednesday to 30 years in prison, following the multi-platinum R&B singer's conviction for exploiting his stardom and wealth over decades of luring women and underage girls into the orbit for sex.
The sentence was imposed 9 months after Kelly, who's 55, was convicted of racketeering and sex crimes in a trial that amplified accusations that had dogged the singer of the Grammy-winning hit I Believe I Can Fly for 2 decades. U.S. District Judge Ann Donnelly in Brooklyn Federal Court said the evidence reflected Kelly's indifference to human suffering and sheer brutality toward his victims. This case is not about sex. It's about violence and cruelty and control, Donnelly told Kelly. You left in your wake a trail of broken lives. Kelly, whose full name is Robert Sylvester Kelly, is among the most prominent people convicted of sexual misbehavior during the Me Too movement against such conduct by prominent men. He did not speak during Wednesday's hearing, but has repeatedly denied sexual abuse accusations. After the sentence was read, his lawyer, Jennifer Bonjean, told reporters Kelly was devastated by the sentence but that he would appeal. 30 years in prison is like a life sentence for him, Bonjean said. The sentencing came after several accusers, some of whom were tearful, told the judge about how Kelly promised to mentor them and help them attain stardom, only to subject them to degrading sexual treatment and physical harm. Many said the abuse led to mental health problems that persist. As a teenager, I didn't know how to say no to R. Kelly when he asked me to perform oral sex on him, said a woman identified as Jane Doe No. 2. She then paused, looked at Kelly, and asked, "Do you remember that?" Several accusers testified during the 5.5-week trial about how Kelly would demand that his victims strictly obey his rules. These included needing his permission to go to the bathroom, calling him daddy, and writing apology letters that purported to absolve Kelly of wrongdoing, among others. The alleged victims include the singer Alaya, who prosecutors said Kelly fraudulently married when she was 15 to conceal earlier abuse. Alaya died in 2001. This is a significant outcome for all victims of R. Kelly and especially for the survivors who so bravely testified about the horrific and sadistic abuse they endured, Breon Peace, the top federal prosecutor in Brooklyn, told reporters after the hearing. He was convicted on 9 criminal charges, including 1 count of racketeering and 8 counts of violating the Mann Act, which bars transporting people across state lines for prostitution. Prosecutors had urged a prison sentence of more than 25 years, saying Kelly had demonstrated a callous disregard for his victims and shown no remorse. I never thought that I would be here to see him be held accountable for the atrocious things that he did to children, Lizette Martinez, one of the accusers who spoke in court, told reporters after the hearing. Defense lawyers said Kelly deserved no more than 10 years, the mandatory minimum, arguing that his history as an abused child may have led to his adult hypersexuality and that he no longer posed a threat. Kelly has been in jail since July 2019. He will likely be transported soon to a jail in Chicago, where he faces an August trial in federal court on child pornography and obstruction charges. He also faces various state charges in Illinois and Minnesota.
Thank you for watching the Daily Roundup here on the EAC News Channel. For more breaking news and updates, check our website, eacnews.asia, or search EAC News on Telegram, Smart TV, or your favourite app store. More from the EAC News team tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We'll see you then.